I was sick last week. Sorry about that. But we were talking about what? 2 weeks ago. Two and 3 weeks ago. You were here for part of it. And you would.
Mousetrap
Okay, what did the mousetrap have to do with what we were talking about?
in the engine.
And the engine. What did they have to do with what we were talking about? Do you remember? This is important.
You have to have every piece.
You have to have every piece. It's called irreducible complexity. Okay? Irreducible complexity. The mousetrap has irreducible complexity. The motor that we brought in has irreducible complexity, but so does the cell. They thought the cell was simple back not that long ago and all the way back to Darwin's time and before, but it's highly, highly, highly complex instead, right? So we have things in it like the bacterial flagellum motor that we looked at. It has the kinesin, that is a transport system. It has this thing I can't pronounce very well, telomere, which is an apparatus that tells us, in a way, how our lifespan is going to go, depending on the tips of it. There are countless examples of what we call irreducibly complex things in all around us, not just in the physical world, like the mousetrap and the motor, but inside of us and around the universe and living things. All right? I want to play about this is a really short video, maybe 4 minutes at the most, that reminds us just a little bit about that.
At the time, little was known about the building blocks of life, cells. More than 150 years worth of technological advancement gives us the remarkable ability to look into these cells and reveals one of the great insights of Darwin's principal thesis. The stunning complexity of the human cell is devastating to the theory of evolution. Single-cell organisms like amoebas were described by Charles Darwin's contemporary, George Henry Lewes, as simply a microscopic lump of jelly-like substance or protoplasm, entirely destitute of texture and consequently destitute of organs. In most cells, a nucleus could be seen, but its purpose was a mystery, and the cell seemed otherwise generally featureless. In such days when the smallest, simplest unit of life seemed that simple, just a bit of jelly with a few boring features, it was easy to imagine that somehow, within that mysterious, life-giving jelly, anything could happen. But as microscopes improved and techniques were developed to tease out the secrets of the inner world of the cell, we have discovered that this supposedly simple jelly-like substance is filled with machinery of astonishing complexity, ingenuity, and design. So the world of the human cell, for instance, is one in which approximately 1 billion chemical reactions take place every second. And these are not random chemical reactions. A human cell is filled with thousands upon thousands of proteins of 10,000 different varieties, molecular machines designed to work together and achieve specific purposes, manipulating their surroundings, creating new structures, and dismantling old ones, in a dynamic dance of complexity that would make the space shuttle seem simple. The Type 4A pilot machine not only assembles, but also manipulates long filaments, pili, and is used by some bacteria to move. Built out of 78,216 different atoms, it is merely one example of the world of complex cellular machinery that Darwin and his contemporaries could have no idea existed. Life is impossible without these complex machines, and even small changes to organisms, as hypothesized by evolution, requires changes to these machines, even the design of new machines, and that is as unlikely as it sounds. Molecular biologist Douglas Axe and colleague Ann Gager explored the possibility that one particular protein could evolve from another similar one based on just a handful of necessary changes to DNA, and found that at currently understood rates of mutation, it would take 10 to the 27 years for such a change to take place. That's a 1 followed by 27 zeros. Impressive, given that scientists think our universe is only 13 billion years old. or about a 1 followed by 10 zeros. In other words, the universe has not been around long enough to allow for the possibility that the protein could evolve from another.
All right. That's all I want to do with that is to refresh your memory with a different video to show you what we're talking about. All right, we're talking about irreducibly complex things. They're saying that it could evolve. We're saying that it looks like there is a designer. All right, we're going to delve into that today. Nathan had asked a question a couple of weeks ago about how would a atheistic evolutionary person kind of counter what BE and others are saying about irreducible complexity. And that's kind of what this class is about today. Here's one statement that I found first. Then we're going to go through a series of things showing in a physical way what they're going to say in a longer video that I'm going to show you in a minute. It's going to be about 15 minutes long. All right? First of all, it says primary argument against, these are people that do not believe that irreducible complexity is a problem for evolution. That irreducible complexity is that even seemingly complex biological systems, seemingly complex, in other words, they're not really complex, they just seem like they're complex, can likely evolve through gradual accumulations of advantageous mutations. And I'm trying to decide which short video I'm going to show you here in the near future about what they mean by that as far as mutations. Where each component of the system provided some benefit even in a less developed form, meaning no single part is irreducible. So think about the mousetrap. So the mousetrap together is irreducibly complex, but they're saying, but the board isn't. Okay? Meaning no single part is irreducible. No single part. Well, we already know that, right? And necessary for the system to function. Essentially, simpler precursor systems, in other words, something that came before probably had that set up and then evolved into it, could have existed with different functions that evolved into the complex system we see today. All right, so here's an easy example. It's silly, okay, I understand that, but I want to get you thinking along the lines before we watch the video where an actual atheist, evolutionist scientist explains this and tries to counter BE. All right, here we have the development of the drill. It started out as an egg beater, but the reason why the actual drill started was because, not because they're irreducibly complex, but because they started out as something that came before. Okay? So a drill actually isn't, in other words, you can take parts of that off and it seems like it's irreducibly complex, but it came from the egg beater, which means that it only borrowed parts from it, so it's not really irreducibly complex. That's what their argument is, and I want to show you that in a minute. Yeah.
The egg beaters are just complex.
Okay, you're ruining my lesson. I want you to be able to see this in a minute when we watch this video. And then it evolved into different kinds of bits so that some of them could do wood and some of them could do bigger things, some of them could do concrete. And eventually it got to the point where it evolved into a bigger system where they could actually use the same parts and everything to drill for oil or to use this drill complex thing for what's called a CNC machine, where they actually take and make different kinds of cuts to make things out, like this. Now this seems really irreducibly complex, but think of all the things that came before it, so that only borrow things from those. This is the logic I'm going to try to show you here in a second. This is only about a minute long. It's kind of a cool process if you've never seen it before, all right? So what is it that these guys are trying to do? They're trying to discredit people like Behe, who's come up with, I think, a brilliant way of showing that there has to be a mind first. But they're scrambling to find out how can this mind not necessarily be first and their theories still work. So remember this guy, Michael Behe. He's one of the main ones that have been proponent of irreducible complexity of the cell, and all those other things that we mentioned before. The bacterial flagellum is basically his mainstay, but there are so many others, lots and lots of others. Here is what one person online used for how he discredits Behe, okay, as not being a real scientist. Now, I always try to tell you and show you the guys what their degrees are. All right, it's not because I'm trying to show that they're really smart. I'm trying to show that both the atheistic evolutionist and the creationist scientist both have PhDs by their names. This is important, but this is what one guy says. Behe has academic qualifications to be considered a very good scientist. In other words, he's got the degrees. But being a good scientist comes down to more than just having degrees, academic qualifications. It is also necessary to carry out advanced research that is respected. What does respected mean? All right, they define that. For the insights it brings to publish books and articles that demonstrate the scientist's capability. Michael Behe is an ardent young earth creationist and an advocate of intelligent design, which means that he expends much of his time and effort in attempting to progress these lost causes. In other words, since they're not something we want to believe in, and he's doing that, and he's not being accepted for publishing papers, which he can't if he is a creationist, which he's not. Behe's not even a creationist. Behe is an intelligent design guy. But because he challenges their belief system, they won't publish his papers. If they won't publish his papers, he's not a good scientist. You see how it works? This is not uncommon, all right? All his media articles and films and videos of appearances are on that same topic. All right. Now we're going to get to what I think is the crux. Watch a video. I want you to take a look at the handout I just gave you, and I don't think you got one. I want you to look for some things. If you got a pencil, actually write some of this down. All right? As you're watching this next film, there's a guy named John Perry. I did some of this in a hurry this morning. I couldn't find this guy's credentials because there's too many John Perry, like the famous actor, and I found a bunch of other John Perry. So when I was trying to write this down, I wasn't positive I was getting the right John Perry. But I'm assuming that he has a PhD, all right? He's doing a lecture. I cut this lecture in from long down to like 15 minutes, all right? So I got the essential parts that I think he's trying to say and that I want to show. His premise is that things that look irreducibly complex really aren't, and that Behe is wrong. And he's going to mention Behe more than once, okay? So what I want you to do, he's going to do this by showing a bee stinger, which is kind of cool because it's irreducibly complex too. In fact, he says, yeah, it appears like it, doesn't it? So he tries to disprove Behe. Notice all of the integrated parts in the bee stinger as we look through it, just like we did with the flagellum and like we did with the kinesin and all the rest of that. He admits that it looks like it's irreducibly complex. So I want you to count how many times does he say things like, we don't know, maybe, possibility. All right? Just try to keep a running total. Make an X on it every time or something. He uses a term known as exaptation. Okay, it's not adaptation, it's something slightly different. You're going to try to write down what that means. And he's also going to talk about something called an adaptive walk. And I want you to know what that means and tell me the first example he uses for an adaptive walk. I think it's silly. All right. What series of creatures does he use to get to the bee stinger without irreducible complexity? There's going to be a series. What are ovipositors? All right. How does he think that the bee stinger evolves in a way that it did, not having irreducible complexity? All right. You can tell that I wrote this early this morning. And does he prove his point? Why or why not? Okay. You all set? Listen careful because he's not talking slow.
Why happens after you get stung? There are muscles in the stinger and it attaches to the body. There are muscles in the keep pumping. There's little pumps you can see in the venom bowl at the bottom. It's the dark thing at the bottom, and it's the venom bowl. You can see the pumps wiggling around in there. Up at the top is the venom sac that's filled with venom. And that's getting sucked into that venom bowl and then pumped right into your skin. And it will keep doing that until it runs out, until the thing breaks. Usually it'll break before the venom runs out. This is what the tip of the stinger looks like. It's spectacular. You've got these two barbed blades on the top and then on the bottom beside it. I call it the stabilizing rod. So that stabilizing rod is stacked into you, and then these digging blades, they move back and forth, and they're attached to the same thing that's pumping those pumps. Is moving these blades. And this is what it looks like when it's going into your skin. It's a self-digging weapon. It's absolutely amazing. And it acts like a heavy-dose needle. So these three parts together, they act as a needle, and the venom flows between them and squirts out the end there. So it delivers that all right into your flesh. Here's the entire thing. I wrote in an electron microscope that I colored to look like my diagram here.
The left side is the electron microscope, the actual one, the right one is a drawing.
I'm showing you the pumps inside the venom bowl. Those are attached to these rods that are also attached to the lances, the digging blades. So when that muscle moves, it moves that one shaft, simultaneously moving the pumps and simultaneously moving the digging blades. So it digs and pumps as it goes. And then once that venom bowl hits your skin, it can't dig any further. So it just keeps moving, keeps tearing at your skin, and keeps injecting venom. Intelligent design is kind of the newest branding of this. The Discovery Institute, which promotes this, I'll say that it's not a religious thing, but it's almost all of them are religious. So religion is the things motivating them to do this. Michael Behe is a biochemist, and he's the one who proposed irreducible complexity as an argument against evolution. He defines an irreducible complex system as a single system composed of several well-matched interacting parts. Remember that piece there? Interacting parts that contribute to the basic function, wherein the removal of any one of the parts causes the system to effectively cease functioning. So if you think about that view center here, here's the diagram of the view center. If you take away these, if you take away the venom, it doesn't work. If you take away the venom sac, it doesn't work. If you take away the pumps, it doesn't work. If you take away the digging blade, just one of them, it doesn't work. This fits his description spot on. He goes on to say that an irreducibly complex system cannot be produced directly, that is, by continuously improving the initial function, which continues to work by the same mechanism, by slight successive modifications of a precursor system. And evolution works by slightly modifying things, right? And he says the reason he came to this is because any precursor to an irreducibly complex system that is missing a part is by definition non-functional. Another way to say this using vocabulary, the vocabulary that's more common to evolutionary biologists would be that you cannot create an irreducibly complex structure through a single adaptive walk. An unadaptive walk in reality is when something first starts to be selected for a new function, a new specific function. And a good example of this, these are chicken feet. And you can see that the chicken feet have some webbing between the toes. And if you look at a bunch of chickens, you'll notice that different individuals have more webbing or less webbing. There's variation here in any population of chickens. Then if you look at a duck's feet, you see that they have webbed feet, which are good for swimming. Well, chickens can swim. They actually can swim quite well. Not every as well as a duck. And it's pretty easy to imagine. that if a population of chickens were in an environment where they had to swim to survive, or where that's how they got their food, you would start to see that all the individuals in that population that happen to have the best weapon, they're going to end up getting more food, they're going to be healthier, and so they're going to pass on those traits to their offspring. There might be different genes already in that single population that not all affect the weapon in a positive way, and all of those are going to be, they're going to end up interbreeding with each other, and the ones that don't have good weapon are going to end up losing out in the evolutionary race here. And the term for this in modern times is exaptation. Darwin called this conversion. He actually wrote about it in his first book. He's incredibly insightful. He already wrote about this in his very first book, but exaptation is the word that we use for it now. It's when a trait or system starts being used for a second function, one for which it did not originally evolve. An exaptation can trigger a new adaptive walk. It doesn't always, but it can trigger a new adaptive walk. Here's a real life example of an exaptation. The birds shed their feathers, and this one found out that he could use his to scratch it. The question is, when we look at the bee stinger, is there a meandering backside pathway that we can find in biology? The answer is, we're going to find out here. This is a grasshopper, and it has this bizarre, very creepy thing. A lot of people find that very disturbing. It's trying to dig a hole. It's trying to have an asphalt. It's really confused. It's not going to work. But it's trying to dig a hole with these scrapers on its rear end. And that structure is what we call an ovipositor. It's actually made of 6 whole parts. They're kind of tangled together. And we can move them with muscles that are attached to them. And when it uses those to dig a hole and then it lays eggs in the ground. It's an ovipositor. Ovo is an egg, and positor is an depositor. So it's an egg depositor. That's what it looks like in grasshoppers. We don't know what the original ones would have looked like. The fossils of insects are not going to be the ones first to know that. But when you look at embryology, you can see that they start out as these kind of little nubs. There's 6 little nubs, and then they're getting closer together and longer, and then they intertangle, they intertwine, and then become this structure on the grasshopper. And so maybe the first ones were just 6 little hard nubs on the bottom of the animal that it was using to scrape the ground. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe there were 6 little hair-like things that were kind of guiding the eggs that fell out, so it kind of help Indian where it's going to land. We don't know, but those are 2 very obvious possibilities, right? For a simple beginning of the structure. Here we have a katydid. That looks like a stinger, right? It's terrifying. I found one of these when I was a little kid. I thought it was a stinger, and I threw it away. It was terrifying. It's actually just the ovipositor. It's the same structure we just saw in the grasshopper. Here's the katydid using that. It's using it to dig a hole, and it's moving. Movement. Surprisingly similar to that bee stinger that we saw earlier. Foreshadowing. And it's using that to dig a hole, and it's going to lay its eggs. So its eggs actually go through that, into the ovipositor, go down that tube. The back and forth motion roll the egg into that hole. And the inside of the ovipositor has these kind of little flaps. Somewhat similar to the valves inside of the bee stinger. Little flaps can kind of catch that egg and push it as it's going down. They catch it and push it. There's also some fluid that comes out of those eggs that has antibiotic properties and things that make the egg bitter to predators who don't want to eat those eggs. And so there's some fluids, but the glands that are producing those fluids are fairly small and a katydid, but all of that's coming out of these eggs. There's the egg, there's a little bit of fluid, and it's going through the ovipositor. So there's another little zigzag. Now, the ancestor of bees was not a cricket or it was not a katydid or a grasshopper, but it shared a common ancestor with crickets and grasshoppers, so already had an ovipositor. And so we can imagine that there might have been a pattern like this in the lineage that gave rise to bees. This is a sawfly. This is very closely related to bees. So there's sawflies, ants, bees, and wasps are all very closely related. Bees evolved from a group of wasps. Wasps evolved from a group of sawflies. And you can see its ovipositor here. She has a very interesting ovipositor. Only the females that have these, by the way, the males don't have them. Hers has these little serrated edges on it. And she'll use her to cut into plants and lay her eggs inside of those plants. So it's doing a lot more than that katydid one was digging into the sand. This is what it looks like under an electron microscope. On top of it are two digging blades. Well, we want to sort of from the side. There's two digging blades, and then there is a stabilizing rod there that colored in green. We're starting to see some parallels here. Right? And then we go to wood wasps, which are actually sawflies. They're misnamed. Wood wasps are sawflies. And its ovipositor is even more similar to that of a stinger. It's nearly identical to a stinger. It's just way bigger. And that can drill into solid wood. It's absolutely amazing. It's got these kind of, even on the stabilizing rod, it has these kind of ribs so that it will catch into the wood as the digging blades are moving. It catches into that wood and it just pulls itself deeper and deeper into the wood. And they also have the secretions that they have with their eggs are a lot more intense. They have huge sacs that are holding these secretions come out of their eggs that help digest the wood because the babies will eat this digested wood. And so she has inside of her body what biologists call a venom sac. It's a plant venom. It's for dissolving wood tissue, plant tissue. But it's very similar in structure to the venom sac in wasps and bees. And so we're finding all of these structures are starting to get more familiar here. So we've seen animals that can lay eggs in the dirt. We've seen animals that can lay eggs in plants. Here's an animal laying an egg inside of another animal. This is this little wasp. This company up here, they sell these wasps and you can put them in your greenhouse because they'll fill all the aphids for you. They lay their eggs one at a time inside aphids. Aphids are a great target if you're not a very good hunter because the aphids stuck to the plants. It's got this little kind of face stuck in there. It's drinking that plant blood. So you can just walk up to it and poke it. You're not going to fight back much. I'll fight back a little bit. You can poke it and insert your eggs. And that's what she's doing here. This is another wasp. She has venom so her venom glands, the molecules in there have evolved to be very potent at interacting with the nervous system of animals. So it can act as a defense weapon, and it can also act to paralyze the caterpillar, which she has done here. She's taken it back to her nest, she's going to lay eggs in it, and they will eat it from the inside out and hatch. And thus is the circle of life. Here's a really interesting one. This is the jewel wasp. She's tackled a target that's way more difficult than an aphid, way more difficult than a caterpillar, something that's bigger than her. And what she does is she first starts by attacking it and stabbing its legs, to paralyze its legs. Her venom also interacts with the nervous system. And once it can't fight her very well or run away, she carefully inserts her stinger into the brain, not injecting eggs, just injecting venom only into the brain. And then it's in kind of a stupor, and she can pull it around, and it kind of will use its own legs. It's almost like a lobotomy, so let's just kind of do what you say. Not exactly, there's a struggle here, a little bit of a struggle. She will walk that thing back to her nest, where it's carefully enclosed, and then she'll lay an egg in it, that will hatch. And it's got plenty of food to eat when it hatches. And thus is the circle of life. So again, we've got animals now that are using their ovipositors for very, very different functions, and there's been selection pressure to adapt more and more effective venom at affecting the nervous system of animals. Now, we're always at the point where wasps will actually use their ovipositors just as full-out hunting weapons. Most wasps actually they eat pollen and nectar and stuff. When they're adult, their larvae are carnivorous. And normally when they're hunting for their babies. I'm not sure what's going on here, and I'm not from the species, but I think she's actually just drinking some of the fluid and she's going to take pieces of meat back to her babies. I don't think she's actually eating the meat here, but I could be mistaken. But she has used her stinger and venom in that to hunt. This is another caterpillar she's killed on the spot, and she's dissecting it there. Here we have the ovipositor, the stinger of a wasp, a paper wasp, next to the stinger of a bee. And you can see that they are nearly identical. The big difference is that the barbs, those backward-facing barbs, are a lot smaller in a wasp, and that allows them to stab you multiple times and pull out, and you can fly away if it doesn't kill them. That is how this irreducibly complex structure evolves. So here we have a winding pathway from a simple scraping structure all the way up to the stinger. using comparative anatomy of organisms that are closer and closer related to honeybees. The second thing to remember is that irreducible complexity is not a problem for the process of Darwinian evolution. The sample quantification acted upon by natural selection can produce irreducibly complex structures. I open the time for questions.
And they clap. All right. You got some really, you were writing a lot, and I want to hear most of what you had to say if we have time, all right?
Oh,
But I want to ask a couple key questions first, all right? What was the first example? Actually, there were two first examples. I was thinking one, but there's actually two. Before he ever got into the bees and such, what were the first two examples that he used for exaptation and an adaptive walk, so to speak? All right? What was the first one? I saw you writing it down.
The chicken.
The chicken and the duck, all right? So because a chicken has a smaller web, then the duck must have evolved into one that had a bigger web on its feet because it likes water better, so it adapted and now, it doesn't say how a chicken became a duck. That's important. It doesn't, because they can't see that. There's no fossil, we're gonna talk about fossils later, that's halfway between a chicken and a duck. There isn't. In fact, I looked it up. If a duck tries to breed with a chicken, it'll kill the chicken in the process, because they don't do that the same, all right? It's totally different. What was the second example? It's silly. Huh?
the pear.
A parrot has a feather that falls off and he scratches an itch with it. So the implication is that down the road, maybe that they'll grow certain feathers that are important enough to fall off and scratch itches. This is a PhD, right? So, what were the series of creatures that they used that went from a bee stinger to, or went from the predecessors to a bee stinger? Can you name some of them? What was one? Hops around. Cricket, grasshopper. Don't think they used cricket, but it's a grasshopper. Good. What was another one?
The katydid.
Katydid. What was another one? Anybody? You weren't sleeping, were you? What was another one? Remember?
It's got a blistering head, that's why I put my head.
No, I didn't even notice that. I wanted to make sure you listened at all. Do you remember any of the other ones?
It's sawfly that can tunnel.
Sawfly, good. Wood wasp, regular wasps, okay? Did they explain how any one of those, well, first of all, let me ask you this. Were any of the mechanisms in those not irreducibly complex? They were all irreducibly complex, which brings us back to the first comment you made when we were talking about a egg beater going to a drill, going to a oil drill rig, going to a CNC machine, all right? What was it you said then? Do you remember approximately?
The egg beaters are irreducibly complex.
Every one of them was,
Yeah.
wasn't it? So what does that show us? Does that show us evolution or does that show us something else? It shows us common design, doesn't it? Like, this guy designed this, but this guy designed it not because it evolved into that, but because the design is good, so let's keep using that design. Right? Big difference. Did this guy prove his point? Why not?
He didn't go far enough, right? He just gave other examples of irreducibly complex machines and said, look, they're all similar. Their mechanisms, look, they're all similar. And then he ends it with, that statement's not true. They didn't make honey.
Yes,
See that big red line?
It's so pretty simple sometimes, isn't it? Okay? And I've seen arguments like this over and over and over again on various evolutionary versus creationist topics for a long time. A long time. So every one of those systems to me look like it's irreducibly complex. So there's still, even if one did evolve into the other, which I don't believe it did, all right? But even if they did, like you said, they didn't go out back far enough because they're still starting with an irreducibly complex organism. Now, when we started out talking quite a while ago about the mind versus matter. That's how we kind of started the class, remember? We spent a couple weeks on that. So that either mind had to come first or matter had to come first. The creationists said that there was a mind first. The intelligent design argument that doesn't necessarily believe in a God like we do still says there had to be a mind first. But the atheistic evolutionists can't say that, so they say that matter had to come first, and matter doesn't have a mind. And we use the example of a rock. It could be a rock, it could be a gas, it could be a soup, it could be whatever. It doesn't have a mind. Okay? When they're posed with that argument that how did matter change into a mind, there are some of them, these guys have PhDs, that have actually proposed the idea that aliens came down and zapped the soup in the pond that made the first cell. What same argument as you just said, you saw the flaw in. I don't want you to answer this, I want someone else. What's the problem with that argument? Can you see it? Caleb, can you see it? They're taking the problem back another generation. Because if that's true, where did the aliens come from? There's still a mind maybe, but
No matter what.
did the aliens always exist? What?
No matter what, there's still an outside influence.
They're still an outside influence, yes. But even farther back than that, where did the alien itself come from? Was the alien always in existence? Well, what's the difference between the stupid idea that an alien already exists or that God always exists? They both take faith of some kind. All right? Very good. Any other comments on this before I wrap it up? Yeah.
This was, and I'm starting to see this a lot more. This is all about kicking the can down the road and trying to sound smart while doing it.
There's nothing else they can do,
Yeah.
and they know it.
They do this with a lot of things.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
The new adaptive walk, that's just something that changes that starts a new branch of the evolution tree. Right? Like the
kind of.
shape changes
Yeah,
down the branch.
It could be that. It could be simply that. Yeah, it basically, I think, would boil down to that.
Oh.
Okay, I was going to get a little more technical, but I don't think I'm going to because there's not time and I'm not sure I'm smart enough to say it the way I want to.
Is that, yeah, that makes sense.
All right?
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Notice that he said, well, at one point he said, well, these two things didn't evolve from each other. Well, if they didn't, what in the world are you bringing them up for? You know? There's a lot of other stuff we could poke holes in this. And notice everybody laughed at me. Right? Eating it up. This is what a guy named Fred Hoyle said. Now, Fred Hoyle was a scientist. He was an atheist. He believed in evolution, but he knew that mind couldn't have, or matter couldn't have done this all by itself. And he made a couple of important statements. The first one is, the chance of even a single cell molecule, precursor to the life forming, is the same chance as if you fill the solar system wall to wall with blind men, each with their own Rubik's Cube, and they all came up with the solution at exactly the same time. It is nonsense of the highest order that this happened by chance. This is an atheist saying this. Here's the second statement that I had by him. The chance of life arising from non-living matter through random processes is comparable to the chance of a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a Boeing 747 from the materials that are inside of it. Only a Boeing 747, which we heard in another previous video, is actually not anywhere near as complex as a single cell. And they know that now. Remember what this guy said? We choose to believe the impossible, that life arose from spontaneous generation, which we know is impossible because it was disproved over 100 years ago. They know this, right? And we even have what Darwin originally said, and that is, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications. That's exactly what this video was about. We go from a grasshopper to a katydid to a this and this. They didn't. I don't think they proved their point. Which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications. My theory would absolutely break down. And I think it has.
So the dude at the end said that irreducible complexity doesn't even affect Darwinian evolution. He's going against what Darwin said himself.
Yeah, that's my point.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. I had another movie I was gonna show you, but it's about 10 minutes, so we're not gonna get to do that. I'll have to decide. Now, next week, I'm hoping, depending on which direction I'm gonna go, but I'm thinking we're gonna have some fun, so I hope you're all here. We're gonna actually bring out dice and cards and spinners and pulling marbles out of a bag, all right? We're gonna talk about odds, how to figure probabilities. And then we're gonna apply this because some of the other things we're gonna talk about coming up, a few things that we've already talked about have to do with what are the odds of certain things happening. I want you to see how those odds are figured in a very simple way. It's not gonna be a hard math class, but it's gonna be a fun one, where we're gonna do a few things, and then I'm gonna show you why that's important. Any other questions or comments before we go?